I'm Mike Olander, State Director of AARP North Carolina, and I want to welcome you to this very special program, this great discussion we're about to have about the upcoming North Carolina Senate debate, which is airing this Friday, October 7th on Spectrum News. We've got some great guests with me today to talk about what's at stake in this coming election, why this debate is so important, and what are the issues that are most important for North Carolina residents who are 50 and older. Before we get into, or I introduce our guests, a couple of quick things about AARP and why we're having this discussion with you today. First and foremost, just so we all know, AARP, we're an organization that represents more than 1.1 million members throughout the state. We focus on issues, not on politics. And so our discussion today and what we're trying to accomplish is to make sure that in this era of really fierce partisan politics, we're able to take a look at the issues, particularly those that affect those who are 50 and older the most, and encourage those who are seeking office to work in a bipartisan manner to constructive solutions. So as far as AARP goes and how we're going to structure this, we're not here to play politics. We're not here to talk about the specifics about what candidates are doing right or what they're doing wrong and all that other type of horse race that you see on a lot of other programs. Today, we're really going to be focusing in on the issues. Quick word about AARP. Unlike many advocacy organizations, even most advocacy organizations, AARP does not have a PAC, a political action committee, which means that we do not endorse nor write checks or give contributions of any kind to any political parties or anybody seeking office or anybody who's in office who's seeking reelection. Once again, we focus on issues, and with having more than 38 million AARP members throughout the country, that makes AARP members and the 50 plus voter the most important, in our opinion, voting bloc in America today. So that said, let me switch gears really quickly again and just tell you a little bit about what AARP does do. First and foremost, we raise visibility of 50 plus issues to those who are seeking office and those who are currently in office. We work across party lines, regardless of what party the candidate affiliates themselves with or who they're working with once they are elected. AARP works with everybody because we're about getting things done in a way that's going to affect all Americans because, of course, we're all aging, living here, and we all want the best things for us and our families. We want to inform candidates and those who are currently in office about issues that are important to the 50 plus voter. We want to make sure that they understand that the decisions that they're making affect not only people who are 50 and older today, but future generations. And of course, we want to make sure they have the best information possible to make the most informed decisions possible. We want to provide voters with basic information about where candidates stand on issues. And again, we don't get into specifics about their politics, but rather where they stand on important issues that will determine what the future of America, of aging in America, is likely to be. And then lastly, we're also helping to inform voters on where and how they can cast their ballots. As we all know, during the COVID period, voting was quite different than it was in traditional years. Some things have changed and some things have not changed since COVID. And so there's still a lot of confusion out there as far as mail-in ballots and the various deadlines that come with casting your ballot. And there's a lot of great information that we'll be sharing with you throughout this program, some links. One real basic one is aarp.org/NC to get some links to that basic information that will help you keep informed about what types of deadlines are in place for voting in this general election. And then, of course, we just had a census in 2020, and so we have newly drawn districts. And so there may be some confusion among a number of voters in some of those new districts or folks who are right on the border who aren't really confident if they're still voting in the same place and for the same district. And so, once again, our role is to help offer some clarity and some direction so folks, again, can get the good information they need so they have the opportunity to vote in the proper way on election day or using mail-in ballots as per the opportunities. So Once again, thank you so much for being with us. And I want to go ahead and get into introducing our guests. You see here, we have three really great guests with us. Brian Lewis, you may recognize him. He's a frequent on-air guest at Capital Tonight, which is a nightly public affairs show covering North Carolina politics. He's also co-host of the popular weekly podcast, Do Politics Better, which covers a week in news of Carolina politics, featuring guest legislators. And of course, he's also known to be a very effective lobbyist in helping to inform legislators about important issues. Brian, thank you so much for being with us. We also have Dr. Catherine Sevier, who is our AARP North Carolina State President. She's been with us in that role for about 6 years now, and she has a long career in nursing. Dr. Sevier, thank you so much. And last and certainly not least is Phil Bowen, a longtime AARP North Carolina volunteer who has worked with us very closely on issues related to advocacy and helping inform legislators at all levels about what issues are important to the 50-plus voter. Phil, thank you. Let's begin with Brian. Brian, you engage in a lot of conversations around the state with elected officials, political analysts and advisors, pundits, and everyday folks who are paying attention to the election process. What are you seeing as themes as we approach this November election?
Oh, well, thank you for having me. First of all, Michael, I just turned 51. This is my first election, big election, in which I am in my 50s. Issues of 50-plus-year-olds, it's amazing how you turn 50 and things come into focus really quickly. It's great to be with you. So when I'm talking to legislators and political pundits and those working on both sides of the aisle, the big issue going into this November election is inflation. We're hearing it from Republicans who are trying to put that on the current administration. President Joe Biden, he's in the White House, so he's responsible for inflation. And then on the Democratic side, their messaging is, look, this is a global phenomenon. And this isn't about Joe Biden. It's about the supply chain. It's about the effect of COVID and some of the policies of the past administration. So you're seeing a lot of messaging around that where they are trying to land some punches. Some are landing, some aren't. But the big theme here, Michael, the big theme is they're not trying to get their side, one side or the other. It's all about the swing voters and who they can convince is responsible for inflation. We know that inflation is affecting older Americans more than other segments because a lot of fixed income, you have retirement income that is caught up into this. And what do you do as prices go up and your income doesn't? How does that affect your ability to pay bills? And politicians are trying to land the punch there.
Thank you so much there, Brian. Not too much of a surprise they're hearing inflation being that top concern. We're hearing that over and over. Dr. Sevier, what are your thoughts on that, specifically when it comes to those 50-plus pocketbook issues, which again, does differ a bit from other types of inflation or inflation in the more traditional sense?
Well, I think those of us who are in that 50-plus group are nervous, especially as you approach a time in your life where you're retired and you are no longer earning as much as you might be before. Inflation couldn't come at a worse time than that. And so many folks are really worried about where they're seeing the costs go up. Healthcare costs and insurance premiums have gone up quite a bit. The amount of income that we're seeing, if you're a Medicare or a Social Security recipient, is not enough to support your livelihoods in the same way. Property taxes and any relief that can be seen there are all issues that become very significant when you're living on your fixed income and the income that you have accrued over the years. So it's even more acute for that 50-plus age group than it is others. And then add to the fact that there are some real problems with people over the age of 50 and employment. We are not being employed at the same rate that other people are as the workforce is picking back up. So economics is really important to all of us in that group.
Thank you so much. That's so important, I think, for these Senate candidates. This debate this Friday night on Spectrum News to be hearing is just how important this is. You know, these inflationary issues are different for people who are 50 and older, and they really do have a world of different concerns other than those, different from those under the age of 50. For those who are 65 and up, issues like Social Security and Medicare have always been extremely important. And Phil, while these 50 plus or 65 plus voter block is certainly not a monolith, you do have a lot of variation in terms of their take on these issues. We do know that this is really important. So when looking at this Senate race coming up between Ted Budd and former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Cheryl Beasley, what do you want to be hearing as far as they're addressing these issues of Social Security and Medicare for current and future generations?
Well, thanks, Mike. To me, the two areas that I think Congress can start addressing, could address right now, are Medicare and Social Security. Those are items that have been talked about and AARP is focused on for a number of years. And as a new retiree, I expect to be around for a long time. So I want to be sure that Social Security is protected and that it's going to be there the whole time I'm going to need it. And that, that is something that I think our Congress should be able to address and should be addressing. As far as Medicare is concerned, I have to have eye exams and my teeth worked on a regular basis, and the fact that Medicare doesn't cover that is certainly an expense. And what Catherine talked about is that both of those areas, medical care is increasing, the cost of it's going up, and there's got to be something that I think Congress could address as far as improving how Medicare is taking care of this increasingly large number of the population. I mean, the number of people over 65 is increasing rapidly, and they're going to need additional health care. So Medicare and Social Security seem to me to be sort of low-hanging fruit for Congress to go after.
Thank you so much for that, Phil. And one of the things that we've often heard when we meet with legislators, particularly those at the federal level when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, Medicare in particular, a lot of them think that Medicare covers everything and there's no out-of-pocket costs. It's amazing how ill-informed so many are, and to know that no, it doesn't cover anything or everything. And there are a lot of high pocket costs. And we know Congress recently worked to address some of that, but there's still a long way to go. Let me get back to Brian, just to get not into some horse race, but just a little bit more, specifics about this particular race coming up between Ted Budd and Cheryl Beasley. This debate, many thought wasn't going to happen. Ted Budd, some could argue, got to where he is with the nomination without having to do a debate. And we've been seeing the polls getting closer and closer, and one's up this poll and then the other candidate is up the next poll. What, in your opinion, what do each of the candidates need to do tonight to appeal to the voter? And what are you going to be looking for, particularly as one now who's getting into his 50s?
Yeah, I'll be paying attention. That's for sure. I'm looking forward to the debate. And first, let me say, Tim Boyum is a great debate host. He is a polished journalist here in the Raleigh area. He's been covering the General Assembly and U.S. politics as it pertains to North Carolina for over 2 decades. I'm looking forward to a really good debate. Here's what I'm looking for from Ted Budd. He has never really had to be on a stage and talk about policy issues. He's kind of campaigning as this everyday man. We see him out on the stump speeches. We see his ads all over television, but we have yet to really see him stand and have to really talk about policy solutions, what they mean to older Americans. And that's what I'm looking for. From Sherry Beasley, she is a former Chief Justice here in North Carolina on the Supreme Court. She is not your everyman. She's very professorial. She is a sharp legal mind. Is she going to be able to relate to the average North Carolinian, being this Chief Justice who wore this black robe for so many years, made history doing it, by the way? I am looking for her to make that connection to voters.
I think you're right. It's going to be a fascinating debate, seeing those two different personalities with those different styles and backgrounds. And thank you so much for illustrating like that, Brian. I think you're right. I think we're in for quite a show. And who knows, if things continue to be tight, well, I won't hold my breath for another debate this month, but we'll definitely have to try to get out of it what we can. Dr. Sevier, let me go back to you with a real specific question related to COVID and long-term care. Due to the pandemic, existing problems in the nation's nursing homes were exacerbated, and more than 200,000 residents and staff succumbed to the virus, and the chronic staff shortages and inadequate oversight increased. What are the issues there, and what do we need our members of Congress and the Senate to be actively working on when it comes to our long-term care system?
Well, I think all of us who've just lived through this COVID experience would agree that COVID has shined a light on the healthcare delivery system in this country. And one of the places where we knew there were challenges, and they were very actively and almost urgently exposed, were the nursing homes. And they were and are a place where our most vulnerable, disabled, and seniors go for 24-hour support and care. And without help to make sure that we have adequate staffing, and this was a place that not only did a number of residents succumb to the disease, but we lost a lot of staffing. And so workplace issues are there, quality issues. We have no regulations that in our state and in many other states that say what the staffing levels should be. So we've got a lot of catching up to do in providing quality care in nursing homes. We also have a lot of people waiting for beds. And so one of the things that AARP has been very supportive of and active in is expanding our home and community services for veterans and for people that are at home, and for their caregivers, because little is it recognized that we have thousands of caregivers in our communities who are unpaid and who are paying out of pocket to keep seniors and keep the disabled at home. So there's some things that Congress definitely needs to do about that. They need to address home and community-based services. They need to address credits, tax credits for caring. They need to address digital equity when it comes to being able to provide broadband and healthcare services in the home if the person's able to stay there. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And of course, addressing regulatory issues.
Great. That is so important. And Dr. Sevier, if I can just ask one follow-up to that question about the digital equity is so important. And as you mentioned, during COVID, when people were relying on things like telehealth way more and saw the value in it, for many out there, we realized where the gaps are in terms of coverage and being able to get those types of services. Heaven forbid we have another pandemic. Where are we going to be? When it comes to this digital equity, what can you say a little bit more about that? About what are the types of things we need to be hearing from those seeking office and how they can address some of these issues?
Well, as we've talked about the important role of technology moving forward, one of the things we know about in North Carolina is that we are a rural urban state. And our rural areas have historically not had the broadband support that they've needed to actually get adequate technology to the person. And so there's big pieces of this. There are the pieces of the technology, that we need. There's the access to the technology. There's the education that people need to be able to use it. And there are the regulatory changes that need to occur around reimbursement if we are going to provide remote healthcare services in those areas. So it really is an area where there needs to be a comprehensive plan that comes into play. And a lot of that is going to need to be funded at the federal level because we are a very digital society, and we want people to be able to receive care from their care providers wherever they are. So it's going to be a big job for our Congress to really address that.
Thank you so much for putting it just that way, Dr. Sevier. And for those watching, this is an illustration. When AARP goes and meets with legislators, as I mentioned, we don't endorse, we don't have a PAC. What do we do when we meet with legislators? What Dr. Sevier just illustrated, which is to talk about how complicated these issues can be and what are the practical applications and what needs to be done in order to address them. So thank you so much for that. Phil, let me go back to you. As we know, the political environment that we're in is hot and it is ugly. Some are saying this is one of the most, divided times the country has been in since the Civil War. That being said, the likelihood of there being a lot of political bombs being lobbed during this debate are probably pretty high. But you are, say an average 50 plus voter. What is it that you want to be hearing? Aside from some of the other issues we talked about, what do you want to just see, both in terms of tone, in terms of content, from these candidates seeking to represent North Carolina in the Senate?
Well, thanks, Mike. I'm really looking for something concrete. You've seen a lot of ads from both sides about, who's going to do what and who's going to do who to who. But I'm looking for really something that says, okay, here's my position on Medicare, Social Security, inflation, whatever the topic is. I want to have somebody that I feel like I can talk to once they get in office and say, okay, here's AARP's position on this. Can we work with you and see what we can do to make this happen? So I'm looking for, somebody to say something that says, I really have a commitment to this policy and I really want to make this happen, and I'm willing to work with whoever I have to work with to see it happen. And so the bombs are not particularly interesting because at some point in time they're going to get in office, and I want to see them have some specific policies that I think the 50 plus voter can say, okay, that's something that I could support.
Excellent. Concrete solutions is something we need more of for sure, not only in terms of words, but in actions. And with that said, let me go to a last question for this program. Back to Brian. Brian, you're a pro at this. You understand the importance of messaging and delivery. And with all of the political rhetoric that's out there, what needs to be done with it for an issue for it to actually get to that level, where it stands out, where it becomes one of the big takeaways, the morning after the debate that folks are talking about, that's, free of the political rhetoric, but focused on the issues?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to borrow a little bit of Phil and Dr. Sevier. So as we're outlining all of the issues older North Carolinians are facing, 50 plus, 60 plus, and there's buckets even within those age segments, we really need someone to articulate how they're going to get things done. Because as Dr. Sevier lists those issues that Congress is not taking up, let's be perfectly honest here. Our United States Congress, which includes the Senate, is one of the most dysfunctional political bodies in the world right now. They can't seem to get past their political talking points and work on issues. You feel like they want to score points over here, or if there's a party that's in the White House, we have to do everything we can to block them from being successful. And the same goes from the White House to the Congress. So what I think would be news making when we wake up Saturday morning after Tim hosts this debate Friday night, I believe the candidate that looks us in the eye and articulates not only what we need to get done, but how we need to get it done. Who are you going to work with across the aisle to get this done? What is your path? How do you like to govern? How do you see Congress working? Too much of the political ads that Phil talks about are just talking points from the political parties. I think most North Carolinians, most Americans, especially older voters, are tired of the rehashed talking points from the political parties. We would like in North Carolina to send a statesman or stateswoman to the U.S. Senate to actually get things done. Whoever does that Friday night, they win the debate.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian, and thank you all so much for being with us. And I have to say, AARP North Carolina really looks forward to whoever our new senator is going to be and working with him or her in a bipartisan fashion across the board to make sure that many of these issues are addressed and that we can work effectively towards concrete solutions to other issues as well. I want to thank our guests so much for being with us. Again, if you're looking for information about from AARP related to this Senate race, you can always go to our website, which is aarp.org/NC. You can also go to aarp.org/vote for just to get some basic information. If you're not sure where your district is, if you go to that website, you'll click a couple links and it'll get you right where you need to be so you can get the best information possible. I want to thank our guests once again for being with us. We really appreciate your time and your thoughts. I'm Mike Ollender, State Director for AARP North Carolina, and we'll be enjoying the debate Friday night with the rest of y'all. Thank you so much.